And good morning, everyone, and welcome to IGTV. We've got with us today William H. Murray, and Bill is going to be delivering the InfraGard editorial on security metrics. Take it away, Bill.
Good morning. Sir William Thomson, Lord Kelvin, gave us a scientific maxim that if you cannot measure something, you cannot recognize its presence or its absence. We are not good at recognizing security. The problem arises in part from computer science and its concept of system security, a demonstrable property of a system that is either present or not, binary, 1 or 0, black or white, never gray. We saw it as a point rather than as a vector with length that we could measure. This is a holdover from the days of one big computer per enterprise. Of course, for most of us, this is not what we're trying to deal with. What we want to measure is enterprise security effectiveness. However, even this is an abstraction, like weather, that cannot be measured directly. On the other hand, since the days of Lord Kelvin, nothing has been subjected to more measurement than weather. Like we measure weather, we will assess security, enterprise security effectiveness, indirectly from those things that we can measure directly. Historically, only a small number of mature IT and security programs have been measured in the same way that we measure other business functions, like design, assembly, and distribution. Such mature programs are few and far between. However, measurement is essential to our effectiveness, our success, and to our being recognized as successful. It is one way that we communicate our accomplishments to our customers, peers, and superiors. There are a number of things that we can and should measure. These include system state, not of single systems, but across a population of systems. We can measure compliance with expectations and progress toward compliance. We can measure cost and spending. We can measure the cost of programs, losses, prevention, and remediation. We can measure attack traffic, successful versus prevented attacks, and the time to detect and remediate. We can measure service level and customer satisfaction. We can measure risk and risk acceptance. The measure of system state is agreement with a rigorous expected state of those features or properties of the system on which we rely. For example, access control, antivirus, firewall, and firewall rules. One measure of the effectiveness of security is net cost. That is, we should measure the sum of the cost of security and the cost of losses. This is the expense that we want to minimize. We cannot measure the true cost of security measures. It includes too many things that we do for other good reasons. However, we can and should measure the direct cost of security programs and initiatives. We call the yardstick for this budget. I learned the concept of budgeting for the cost of losses from Nortel. Before they started to budget it, for them, as for most enterprises, losses were simply unplanned expenses. Said another way, they were not accounted for in any systematic way. One business unit could not be compared to another. One period could not be compared to another. Nortel began to budget grossly and only at the level of a major business unit. However, simply by assigning a line in the budget to it, they began to accumulate data and refine the budget. Over time, they were able to see changes and losses as the result of security initiatives, and they used them to justify those initiatives. We can measure compliance with law, regulation, contract, policy, and standards. In order to be efficient, such measures should be proactive and routine, not something measured only in anticipation of or in response to audits. Note that the opposite of compliance is not non-compliance, but rather a hopefully short list of identified and enumerated variances. Measurement of compliance should include the number of variances, their life, and their significance. Over time, all of these should be going down. At least in the presence of rigorous service level agreements, one can measure service. Unfortunately, for far too long in far too many enterprises, the default service level has been best efforts, and consequently has not been written. The Chief Information Security Officer must ensure that any and all security levels are responsive to the constituents' requirements, expressed in measurable terms, then reconcile to those terms and routinely reported to the constituents. Within expressed assumptions, one can measure the maximum cost of attack in terms of work, access, indifference to detection, special knowledge, and time to detection. Because the cost of detecting and remediating an attack may be lower than preventing it, we must also measure these costs. For most of these metrics, the current absolute value is rarely as important as the direction and the rate of change. Of course, on that basis, a needle that never moves conveys no information, so we should be prepared to abandon even our favorite measures when they no longer move. If we do not measure security, then we cannot expect to influence it, much less to control it. This is not to suggest that it is either easy or routine, only that it is our job. That is why we are called professionals and are paid the big bucks. Thank you. See you next week.
Terrific, Bill. Thank you very much. And you're right about that. We did do a lot of work during the Giuliani administration, quite frankly, on measurement of security. And we did note that if it wasn't measured, then nobody knew what the hell was going on. So you're absolutely right about that. See you next week.
Very good.